All right. So thank you for joining us today. We'd like to welcome Matt Bilotti here today. Matt is currently a senior product lead at Drift, where he is joined as employee number 6. There's now about 600 people. Over the years, he has run growth teams, product teams, customer support teams, and actively ran initiatives across marketing, sales, and customer success. Before Drift, he spent some time at HubSpot and other early stage startups. He actively advises and angel invests in early stage startups and gets excited about solving unknowns. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. I'll be moderating. I'm Dan Somrack, and I'm a member of South Park Commons. I kind of wanted to kick us off with an intro question around like, where does your excitement for growth or acquiring new users come from, and how did you kind of start, like, you're starting to make a brand for yourself with a podcast, and just curious, like, what got you into it?
Yeah. So it's kind of the same thread that got me into joining Drift in the first place, which was I really wanted to learn what it took to build a great company, to build something that worked and scaled. And from day one, our core focus, the thing that we all tried to do, that we were driving, was getting people to sign up, try the product, use the product. And that was our lifeblood early on. And as the company grew and as the company scaled, it continued to be. And when I looked around at most other businesses out there, having good acquisition channels that work, and systems that have like onboard people well, attract people in interesting ways that get them excited, get them into the value prop. Like, all of that is just so core to making a business work. And so I've just been really excited about that. And the acquisition thing is just like it is a way that you help build a company or build a community or build a brand. Like, it's all about acquisition. It's all about getting people in the circle. It's all about getting people involved. And so that is what gets me excited about it.
Well, cool. So I think, Aditya asked you to come in today, right? I'm not sure how much you know about South Park Commons, but mostly community of people that are either building or tinkering. Like, we're starting from -1, like without an idea. We're kind of coming up with a couple different concepts, testing them out. Do you have any advice for customer validation or trying to get those initial customers?
Yeah. I mean, I think what I see more often than should happen is people have a tendency to look at what is working for other companies that they expect and admire, respect and admire, and they try to say, let's do that. When you are early on, you have to really drive most of the early acquisition, most of the early customers, all the customer development. Like, it's all just going to be manual work at the end of the day. Like, there are very few rare exceptions where something can kind of just like take off just like that. But when you think about how some of the best networks and businesses have started, and you peel it back and you go to the origin story, right? Most of the stories of like these successful organizations or companies or communities or whatever, most of the story that's retold is you were talking -1 to 0. Most of the story that's told is the 1+. That is the most of the story that gets recapped when you look at a company that is growing really successfully, or is on the stock market and is worth $10 billion. They talk about, oh, like, they had product market fit with this, and then they built it by doing this, and then this, and then this other thing. Whereas most of that -1 to 0, and even most of the 1, is all just going to be manual work, boots on the ground, emailing people, calling people, just getting in front of people, reminding them that you're there, and making sure that you are continually testing the different value propositions. When I think back to the early days of Drift, we changed every month or so, every few weeks. We would change what our value proposition was. We would try out a new persona, we try out a new user, and we would just kind of like hit the ground and say, all right, how can we get in front of these people? How can we get them interested? And it's really just a game of that in those really, really early days. And especially when you're doing the customer development stuff, it's all just about getting in front of people, understanding what they care about, what they don't care about, getting yourself out of the way of what you care about, and not letting your excitement kind of like blind you to the things that maybe the customer or maybe the member or whatever type of thing you're building, whatever the user is, maybe they're not as excited about it. So it's important to like step out of your own way and then just get in front of people and doing the manual work to make that happen.
What were some of those iterations for Drift? Like, where did you guys start, and what were some of the twists and turns you took?
Yeah, so there is one very visual way to see it. If you go to Product Hunt and you search the word drift and you scroll down past some of the most recent, the few most recent ones, I think there's like 25 different products that we launched during those first 2 or 3 years at Drift. We had a motion where it was every single month we were going to launch a new product. And on most months, month to month, it was, let's try this different persona. Let's try this other thing. When we go way back, there is kind of this other era of Drift. Like everyone knows Drift as the conversational marketing, sales, marketing platform story. But even before that, there was this time where Drift was building like an annotation app and like a note-taking tool. There was this whole like B2C era of Drift that never gets told in the story, right? This is the whole like, most of the story is one beyond, but there is the whole story there. And the important part about it, like when I boil down like why that story worked and why the different iterations along the way, and I'll tell you what a couple of those were, why they landed us to where we are, is because we had a really common thread that was driving our mission, which was to make customer to company communication better. There was a little bit of an early stage where that was kind of being evolved. But even when I talk about the annotation app that Drift had built for a little bit, trying to figure out if they can do that, it was, how can we build an annotation app so that companies can better communicate? It was like support people communicating to customers, the things that they're trying to explain to them. So it's this annotation app. And then that evolved into, all right, let's follow that thread. Well, we're learning that customer support has this like bigger opportunity in it. And so we started trying to focus on customer support tools. And we thought, maybe we can make this like scalable, like machine learning, customer support thing that like removed most of the customer support that you would have to do. And, that led us to, all right, maybe, we kind of learned that people weren't willing to switch away from Zendesk, and that's a whole thing. And it would take us so long to get the parity. And so that led us to a customer success type use case. Could we make this smart CRM that would tell customer success people who was having trouble before they told you that they were having trouble, or things like that? And so we just kind of like kept following that thread through. All right, like we're running into a wall here. What's the next thing? We're running into a wall here. What's the next thing? And that led us to build like an in-app messaging tool. And then that kind of led us to the chat tool that we had in-app. And then that led us to, like this chat thing can be used for marketing and sales. Like, and that was like where the one kind of started, but all of that pre was the -1 to 0, 0 to 1 kind of stuff.
And do you recommend a similar like monthly launches to Product Hunt, or do you think there's like is there a better method that you'd suggest nowadays, like to find your one?
Yeah. So I think for us, and at the time, Product Hunt was the best channel because most of the customers that we were ultimately trying to solve for along that journey were hanging out on Product Hunt. Like those were the early founders, marketing people that like to tinker with new products, like product manager people, product marketers. And those were kind of like all the buckets that we were working with along the way. If I were trying to launch like a net new enterprise company, Product Hunt isn't the place to do that, right? I would spend some time looking at what type of enterprise customer, what type of enterprise user am I looking to serve? Where do those people hang out? And in some cases, they don't necessarily hang out anywhere. And so that's why you end up with like, a sales motion, like an enterprise sales motion. And you start from scratch to, get your first big enterprise client and just grind to make that happen over 6 months. Then you get the next one in 3 months and all that. So I think it's a lot of, for us, for our user and our customer, Product Hunt was like the right channel. For others, may not be. It certainly still is for some companies, some projects, some communities. And then to the other question of would I recommend the monthly cycle, I think that monthly cycle was critical to our momentum, right? When you're super early and you only have a few people, like your winning strategy is generally going to be speed and agility. and the ability to like pivot and change. And so the fact that we forced ourselves to have this monthly cadence meant we were learning so quickly on these like big value prop bets. And so the question I would pose is, what type of marketer you're trying to work in, what type of cadence would best service you to getting to the point where you can actually understand what you have can actually scale, like getting to the point where you can understand that you have something that can scale. Some people that might look like, I don't know, some like weekly new thing to a Discord, right? If you're building something in Web3, right? Like you launched your community on that sort of basis. But if if you're building enterprise, maybe a monthly thing isn't the right cadence, but it's super important to like force yourself to have like a high velocity mode of operating, because your learnings will come quicker. And the most important thing was it forced us to put our ideas out in the open and get feedback on that. Whereas we could have spent a year and a half building some customer support platform tool to then put it out and be like, this is our baby. We've worked on it for so long and we made it perfect, only to then find out that nobody actually wants that because they're super happy with the thing that they have today, right? And so we not only did the ongoing like one-on-one conversations of customer development, but we tested the market with those launches. So if you could find some way to like continually test the market with launches, I think that is the right strategy to have.
In terms of launching to Product Hunt or posting to Hacker News, like those sort of like, hey, we're going to tell everybody about it right now. What's the right bar of readiness to like announce, and what's the trade-off of like, hey, we're a bit too early and now like everyone thinks that they got the wrong impression, or like they didn't see the value, or hey, we could have launched last week, but we just thought we had to fix a couple more things.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of played with all the different versions of that. Somewhere we had a pretty fully baked product. Somewhere we were just kind of launching a marketing page that would tell the story, and like it was building wait lists. And so I think that the thing you have to anchor on is you're never going to feel like you're actually ready. If you get to the point where you feel like you're actually ready, you've probably spent too much time trying to get ready. And so like I want to be clear, there are exceptions to all the stuff I'm saying. None of the things I'm saying are like 100% of cases. There are going to be some cases where like you have to build in stealth because there's like a nuance in the way that the market works, and you have to take that into account. But in most cases, it is, you'll be as ready as you can be. It's probably good to do it a little sooner if you have built yourself a promise of like a cadence of how we are going to iterate from here. If you are trying to go like, this launch is my shot and it's either going to be it's going to take off or it's not, then probably spend a little bit more time. I wouldn't necessarily advise that. I think that has a way less likelihood of success because you're putting like all your eggs into this basket. You're getting really locked into it, and then if you find out that you have to pivot, like it might feel late. It might feel like like you've kind of done all this sunk cost stuff. But yeah, I think it depends. In some cases, it's okay to like launch something that is like a really, really clear, really explicit value prop with a good flow to like get people excited and in. Right. And again, in Web3, it might just be like, we're launching this thing, come join the Discord. Right. That's very, very different than having like a full-fledged product MVP that someone can play with. And I think the right answer fits kind of in the middle for most people.
Yeah, that makes sense. How about all right, so there's some launch, you've got some initial customers. What do you normally suggest for like ways to get more users? And I'll end up asking like two questions. One of them is just like net new customers, but also I've been in a lot of situations myself where I might have a customer, like it's an enterprise customer, but only one of their teams is actually using the product. And how to actually like do an upsell, like get more people interested in not just like acquiring them, but actually getting them using the product. But let's first start off with like, hey, net new customers, like what are your suggestions on getting more of those?
Yeah, it definitely goes back to what I was saying earlier, which is like it's usually still going to be manual in some way. Like if you're building a marketplace and you're scaling city to city, there's going to be a heavy lift every time you go to a new city in most cases. If if you're launching a SaaS app and you get this like spike of users on, you know, your launch day or whatever, and then you're trying to figure out like, how do we continue to double down on this? It's super important to like do what you can to make those people that like, you know, said, I'm interested the first time, figure out how to make them successful with your product in some way. Because in doing that, it will help inform how you can get next versions of them. And in some case, the next versions of them might look like this exact type of person at every other company that exists in the world. In some cases, it's going to be, we don't like, it's not this role, but it's this problem set. And we think the problem set is actually here. So then let's start, you know, let's like hire a salesperson, not put them on a comp plan and just kind of like toss them out. I mean, a comp plan, obviously got to pay salary, but not like a variable plan, toss them out into the world and just go have conversations and try to sell to like the different roles or the different user types and all that. So I think I answered, I kind of like meandered there a little bit.
Yeah. But you mentioned like the salesperson, like when do you hire, like you fan more of like hiring sales early and having them do more manual work or trying more for product-led growth? And then when do you hire your first salesperson?
Yeah. So when we hired our first salesperson at Drift, I actually thought it was a little early to do that and that we could probably solve most of it in product stuff. There's actually, it's funny, we got like a Harvard business case made about like hiring our first salesperson at Drift. And I'm like the anti, like we shouldn't do it. Like I'm presented in the case around that. And the reason for that was I was afraid that we were gonna like get into this place where we were just following whatever the salesperson was able to sell. And I think in a lot of cases, that is where you will land. But the difference in it is what type of salesperson you're hiring. There's like, when I think about the person that we hired at Drift as the first salesperson, it was a really technical person that had sold these types of products before. They understood the user, they understood the persona, and they were just really good at like digging in and understanding like the value that could be sold. Like it was a super value sell. And it wasn't about like, go make us money. It was about go see who we can sell to, go see what types of users care about this. And so in a lot of ways, like it was a salesperson, but he was spending most of his day just doing discovery. Like he would get on a call and they'd ask him for the price and he would just make up a number. And then we would learn like, oh, when he said the number was this high, people ran the other way. When we said the number was this low, they were jumping all over it. And so like he was doing price discovery along the way. He was doing value prop discovery. He would feed back to our marketing team like, hey, I had 3 calls today where I said this thing and people got it, right? And so the hire a salesperson thing, you can do it too early if you try to go with like the traditional salesperson that is just going to get a quota and just like pound it into people until they make their money. That is not the type of person that you would want in this motion. If you're trying to like help a product-led growth motion happening, if you're trying to help a product-led growth motion happening, you got to find that like value understanding experimental type salesperson. If you're trying to just like make a bet that sales is your go to market motion and you're willing to, you know, say we're going to scale this way, and in most enterprise businesses that is how you're going to do it, then go for it. Just know that you're hiring two very different types of salespeople.
Got it. That makes sense, and it's almost like the non-scalable approach that you would do anyway when you don't have a salesperson. Like you're only a 2 or 3 person team. It's like, okay, we need another person doing those same actions because we just can't do 10 jobs. Like we can't build the product, we can't do product management, we can't do design, we can't do like CEO things, as well as continue the customer discovery as quickly as scalable.
Yeah.
How about so to the other question around getting to try to expand within a customer account. And like a lot of times, if I've spoken to a customer, it might be like, hey, one team adopted it, or you're able to get in at a low level because as the earliest company, you're not going to just start selling into C level. How have you seen expansions to an entire enterprise work out?
Yeah. So the first thing is you got to make the first team or the first person that picks it up successful. Like they have to find value in it. They have to find it to be useful. They have to be excited about it. Once you have that, I think the biggest levers to me, which is something I advise any early stage startup I talk to think about that's trying to do like a land and expand motion. The biggest thing is that you have to look at your product experience that you're offering and essentially inventory all the space where a non-user within that company will interact with your product or service in some way, shape, or form. So whether that is, you discover that like your customers are generally taking a screenshot of this report in your product and sending it in some like Monday update email, or, they're putting it in this slide deck somewhere, or they're sharing this link around, or, they're going into meetings and they're screen sharing this thing. Like it's all about like finding what are all those moments where a non-user at a company is going to see or hear about the value that the thing is offering, and understand how you can build something that can add additional value to that other person in some way that gets them to say, I need this thing too, or I need to be a part of this. Like, right. It's all about those touch points there. And it's the same thing when thinking about external acquisition and viral loops and all that. It's inventory all the places where your product interacts with a non-user in some way, shape, or form, whether that's like a super direct interaction, like Zoom. I send you a Zoom link, you're in the product. You got to have the product, you have to use it. That's super direct. Whereas something like Superhuman, I send you an email, I'm using Superhuman, it says powered by Superhuman. It's all about how do you make the person getting an email that says Superhuman to see that it's such a good experience that they want to go learn about it too. Same thing with Drift. We have a chat widget that sits in the bottom corner. People are interacting with our product. They don't necessarily care about our product, but we position ourselves for them to learn more about it if they felt like they had such a good experience. And that's the like powered by Drift, which then we link to a page which says, hey, do you want the experience that you just saw on blank.com? Click here to sign up. And it's super important to like draw the thread through that experience. So for a non-user, or for like someone external to a company or internal in a company, it's not just that one touch point, but it's then how do you draw a line through their experience signing up from the point in which they interacted? Because what I see happen often is I'll see someone in my company using a product. I think it's interesting. I go to like sign up through some like viral touch point that they have in place. And I go to sign up and all of a sudden I'm in just like your classic onboarding experience. There's no reiteration of the value that I experienced, that I was expecting to see. There's nothing that like reminds me where I came from, why I'm here, how I can use the thing that I saw, right? It's all about like, how do you then make an onboarding experience that doubles down on the experience that someone interacted with, so that they can have a super clear line to how I get that thing too. The worst thing you do is like have someone be excited, they go to learn about it, and then they wind up on some like product landing page that doesn't explain anything that they just interacted with. It has some other value proposition, right? You have to draw a really clear line through that whole experience.
And are you able to track that experience as well, or are you measuring it or using analytics to see if people are like, which of these are actually working for you?
Yeah, I mean, in whatever cases you can, you got to do it, right? I've used all the different types of analytic tracking tools out there. Use Mode, Heap, Salesforce reporting, Looker, all sorts of stuff. And I'm gonna make a note because I think this is important to throw out there. Don't over optimize on tracking those metrics super early. Like I see companies go through this phase where they're like, get some traction. And then they're like, all right, in order to get to the next phase, we have to instrument everything and we have to track everything. And then we can make our next decisions. And I think what happens is that leads teams through like this rabbit hole of like, all right, let's track everything. Let's build this report. And nobody is asking up front, why are we going to track this? And what are we going to do with the information we get from whatever report it's going to be? You have to ask that question. What are we going to do with this tracking information? And if we have a good answer for that, then let's spend the time tracking it. But if we can't think of like a a now decision that we have to make in the semi short term that data is going to power, go do something else. Otherwise, you're going to look up, you're going to come up for air in 3 months and you'll be like, oh, shit, we just spent 3 months like tracking things and we haven't built new features. Like we're now, right? Like you could end up in that spot. I've seen it happen. And so it's super important to not over index on those analytics early on.
Yeah, got it. What I've seen that as well. Right? I've been in situations where it's like, hey, you need to show that you're adjusting some metrics, and they turned out to be something that was just unmeasurable, or couldn't even get to it. Or like, all right, spending the time to get there, cool, we'll spend a quarter on that, but where's the new features? When is a good time to do that then? Like when do you start bringing in the tools you're mentioning, and what tools do you suggest, by the way?
Yeah. It's always tricky to say when the right time is. I will tell you that mostly everyone who I've talked to that is like a leader in growth at big name companies where they have 5 growth teams, like 5 people focus on acquisition, 5 people focus on retention. Almost universally, everyone will tell you that their data is a mess. So the reality is if things are working, if things are really working, you're starting to scale, then you instrument stuff along the way. But there's no like, stop what we're doing. It's time to like implement all of our tracking. It's if we have a good answer for what we're going to use that data for, and we could draw a line through, we're going to get the chart. And if the chart looks like this, we make this action. If the chart looks like that, we take this action. Most of the time, people say, all right, let's like build these 8 charts, internal charts. And then you build the charts, and then everyone sits down and looks at it and goes, huh, what should we do with this? Like, what do you think? Right. And all of a sudden you kind of like lost the plot. Right.
Yeah.
So there's that. In terms of tools to use, it depends like what type of product you're building. I think and it also depends on the skill set of your team. If you got a team that knows SQL, there's no beating being able to like build your own, queries and stuff in something like Mode. If you have a less technical team and you want to make data more accessible, like if you're trying to build like a really data-driven culture, something like Amplitude is better for that, because it is easier for someone that is not super technical to show up and play around and find the answers that they need.
So what then is your opinion on A/B testing tools? Or if like, I think I'm going to know the answer based off of your answer to that last one, but what do you think about A/B testing? Or like, how do you actually optimize these different funnels or these different paths that you're trying to work on? Yeah.
So I actually just had a fantastic conversation on my podcast with a guy named Willie, who has run a whole bunch of growth teams. And we were talking about A/B testing, and he has a really good, he kept making really good points around it, which I'm going to share here. And if you want to hear more of that, I would go check out the podcast. His view on it was like, almost all companies that are trying to do A/B testing can't actually do A/B testing. There are very few companies out there that you actually have the correct amount of volume to get real answers on stuff. And so in most companies, you end up in this space where the A/B testing is like, like we can't get statistical significance until we like run this for 4 months. So let's run it for 3 weeks and kind of see where we're at. And in most cases, I personally think like that is how you sort of have to operate. There are also some A/B testing tools that are less like A versus B, and instead use Bayesian statistics to start like showing one version more often as soon as it starts like performing better, and you end up with like a better outcome on the other side. A tool called Intellimise does that really well. But yeah, I think that's a big thing. I'm going to pull another thing from Willie that he shared the other day, which was most like A/B. I'm going to try to quote him. I'm probably going to get it a little bit wrong. He said most A/B tests are set up to be like, is this one better than this one? Whereas most A/B testing should be set up to answer a question. it should, like, A/B test should answer a question of, does a user care about this part of the journey? Is this a lever that we can pull? And he went on to share, like, if someone A/B tests something and they find that like the number goes way down, in most cases that'll be like a failure. Leave the thing that we had and you like move on and play around with different parts of the product because you have a really good version. But his whole point is like, you just learned one of the most high leverage pieces of your flow because you learned that someone cares about that thing. And so the A/B testing, like his philosophy on it is, A/B testing is not just about which one is better and which one do we want to move forward with, but it's about how do we learn what people actually care about and then dig in with those learnings from there and inform other product decisions that we have.
Got it. So given most companies can't do A/B testing, or just like either the significance isn't there, it just comes down to picking up the phone and talking to people and doing more qualitative research.
Yeah, or if you are going to do A/B testing, like you just have to be real with yourself at the scale at which you have to test changes. Like if you have lower volume, things like testing this button or testing like this different image or, like reposition this thing, like that stuff isn't going to play. And so you have to, like, if you're going to do A/B tests and you have low volume, the A/B tests have to be like fundamentally different experiences so that you can, one, have a clearer answer on which of those experiences is better. But two, you'll get a clear answer because the experience is so different. And so the variance is going to be higher. But two, I don't remember what two was. There was this fuzzy thing floating around. I got distracted.
That's all right. You mentioned like viral loops, and externally. So how do you know if a product can support something? And is there anything you can do to add in viral loops, or like, if you don't, like, what are your options?
Yeah, I think I'm going to use referrals as my anchor point here. I think a lot of companies try to answer the question of like, how do we add virality by throwing some referral system on top of their product or on top of their company. Mostly all the time, the referral things just don't make sense because they're not useful in the context of like when the thing matters. So let me think of an example. Like referral systems, like putting in referrals as a virality in a product like Uber or Lyft makes sense because there is consistently a moment in time where you are like with someone and you are talking about it and it's like, oh, you can use this thing. Like, there's like a clear moment. Oh, we just had dinner. You need to ride home. Cool. Like there's this thing, download the app. I'll give you the code. Like there is a moment in time where that just like makes sense to exist. I think most like B2B SaaS companies try to throw in a referral thing because they're like, we need virality, but it's just not going to work in that context because like, when is the moment in time where a VP of marketing is talking to another VP of marketing and they say like, we need a conversational marketing platform. And the other one is like, oh, great. Let me get you a referral for Drift. Like it just doesn't play out that way. Whereas on the consumer side, it does way more so. So on that front, that is how I would think about the referral piece. In terms of other virality, like can you do virality for your other parts of your business? I think it's like you do the inventory I was talking about earlier, look at all the places where you either have a direct or indirect exchange with somebody who's a non-user and be real with yourself on how many of those things exist, how many of those moments exist. Dropbox has plenty of them because if I want to share a file with you, you're going to get an email from me about it. I can double down on like, here's where do you go to view it. You can put files in here too. You can share files back with me. Like there's just so many moments where it makes sense and so many of those touch points. And so it's a be real. How many touch points do you have with a non-user? If you don't have many, don't try to shove a referral system on there. But look at like, what is the inherent virality that you have and how can you build on that? So I'll give another example. I was talking to somebody that is building tools for HR teams to better manage and report on their diversity, inclusion numbers, ENPS scores, and all that stuff. And so he was trying to figure out how can he build some external viral loops or external ways of getting new users from the existing user set. And when you think about the internal use case, like it makes sense in some cases for bigger enterprise, like other teams that are dealing with different business units might be interested in it if they see it. And so there's some of that there. But what we were talking through, and the idea that I tossed out there was, you're building something that companies want to show off. They want to show off how diverse they are. They want to show off that, they are, they're more than 50% women on their team. And so can you build something that allows people to share that, right? It's like the question, if you don't have a really inherent viral loop, the next question is, what value can you provide to your customer that will make them want to share it? And then in doing so, provide value to people beyond that.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I also want to ask you some questions around free trials, like free plans, like how to get someone in. Like, all right, so you're able to get their attention. They come in. Maybe it was from a referral. Maybe they just like other channel. What's the best way to kind of get them to use the product? And what are your those different options, free plans, trials, anything else, that you'd suggest? Like how well do those work?
Yeah. So free trial versus free plan, all that I think depends a lot on industry. It depends a lot on the existing market. If you're trying to build a product where the existing market is like mostly everyone offers a free product, you can look at it two ways and say, all right, if we actually want to compete here, we have to make a better free product. Or you decide our go-to-market is explicitly different. We are going for more like mid-market enterprise. And so we will have a different type of go-to-market. And so free product doesn't make sense here, but a free trial could, because we're doing bigger sales, bigger deals, all that stuff. I think it depends a lot on like, what is the size of the market? Who is the user? And it's very, very different between B2B and B2C. Okay, what was the next part of the question?
Yeah. I guess B2B, like thinking through that case, if there's no existing free trial, or sorry, there's no existing free plans, like do you want to be the first one to have a free plan? Is it and how do you get them to convert to a paying customer?
Yeah. So maybe I'll talk through this in the lens of how we built out Drift, because we started Drift in the first place. Our first thing that like hit in the market was free live chat on your website for marketing purposes, marketing and sales purposes. And that was the thing that hit. We took this thing that was like free for other use cases. Like there were plenty of like free chat for support tools and all that. And we basically said, let's take this use case, let's put it here, and let's scale up from there. And going back to the other question that you had asked, I'm remembering it now, is how do you get them to actually use it and care about it and continue to use it? I was talking to this guy, Darius Contractor, who is like VP of growth at a whole bunch of different places like Airtable. He's at Facebook. I think he's at Vendor now. I really hope I got that right. And he explained it in a way which was, it's all about like human in the loop. So when they were building the like growth motions at Airtable, it was all about like, you have this whole free user base. How do we build like the right moments to bring a human into the loop? And in some cases, there's no human that needs to come in a loop. The user can go right through. They've shown all the success criteria that they will like go and put their credit card in and move on. There are some other activities that you can start to understand, like, if they're looking to use certain feature sets, or if they fall off, like time to get a human in the loop. And so when we were doing like the free version of Drift early on, it was human in the loop for all of it until the human didn't actually have to be there. So people were signing up. I would reach out personally to every single person that signed up. We put our own chat widget on our site, and I talked to every single person that was coming through that had questions. Like it was like we didn't hire a support person to like outsource that first. It was all just like, human in the loop, engineers are answering those chats, designers are answering those chats, and we as a product organization are going to figure out how to not have ourselves in the loop. And when you're early, it's especially important to have the entire team dealing with that, because those are the people that are going to say, I don't want to answer the question ever again. Like, there were plenty of engineers or tech leads that we would have, like, we set up a whole thing that was called chat duty. And so every single person at the company, up to like 50 people, at first it was like you had an 8-hour shift, like once a week, doing chat. And there was like, 3 2-hour shifts a week. And like the amount of times that an engineer would get off of one of those and be like, Matt, I'm going to go fix this thing because I never want to answer this question again. It's just critical to our ability to like get it right early. And so to me, it's like human in the loop as much as you can early on, even if you're trying to do like a free offering or product-led growth thing, as much as you can. Only start to remove yourself if it becomes like completely unreasonable for you to be there. But the other thing too is like, if you're having that sort of volume, hire someone that's like in college that's doing entrepreneurial stuff. Like, this is what I spent some time doing this at a couple other startups where like I was at school, but I would just like answer all the chats and then just like feed it to the team constantly. And like, it was super high volume. They couldn't justify like having, their very few people on there, but they could pay me a small amount of money and I would just like deal with it. And I was excited about it. And I would share all that stuff back and I would take care of the customers along the way. Like, if the volume becomes too much, try to find a person like that, throw them on there. They're trying to learn product. They're trying to like, do startup things, great opportunity for them. And then you still get the value from that human in the loop stuff early on.
The concept of human in the loop is fascinating. And it reminds me of your answer for when to bring in a salesperson. It's like you bring him in, but he's also, or she's also doing customer discovery still.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you scale? You don't really scale, like, because as soon as you get out of the loop, you stop learning almost, or you're going to miss things that actually need to be automated. How big was Drift when it felt like things were a bit more on autopilot?
Not even really there yet. I mean, it started to really feel that way, and less like we were all like running ourselves in every conversation, in every moment, and we started to have systems probably around like 80-ish people. But up to that point, it was like everyone was doing manual stuff. If you Google "this won't scale" Drift, we wrote an ebook about all the stuff that we did in those early phases, and the whole point was like, everyone says this won't scale, and so nobody else does it. But if you get your team to just like do that work, you will end up with better results. You will end up in a better spot. You will have a better product. You'll have a better sales organization. You'll have a better, support organization, because you did all the stuff that won't scale up to the point that it actually became like unreasonable and you had to scale it. That, yeah, I think, and going back to my point earlier around like analytics, it's the same thing. Don't over-index on like the scale automation part until you get to a point where you just can't do it anymore. Because at the point where you just can't do it anymore, that's the only point where you actually know how to scale that thing, like how to automate that thing properly, because you've gone through all the cycles of manually testing all the different versions of how you can deal with that process on your own.
Got it. Yeah, it's that simple, huh? Just do all the hard work.
You just do all the hard work. At the end of the day, you just got to do all the hard work early on. Like there really is no substitute for it. Again, like there are some places where they've launched something and for some reason it just hits like wildfire. But the other thing is like, it could also be your downfall. I followed along. I was a customer of MoviePass early, and that absolute disaster. And they like refused to be in the loop. They scaled it way too quick. They made their like big scaling bets. Like they should have just like locked it down and dealt with the manual stuff until they understood how to scale it. They tried to just scale it and remove themselves way too early, and they ultimately collapsed. Like the amount of like, if you during that era, if you searched movie pass on Twitter, you could scroll for hours of people just saying like, I can't get to anyone, the product doesn't work, I don't know what to do, I'm paying for it, I can't cancel, I don't know what to do. Like they just tried to like scale it and automate it too early, and they remove themselves. And if you're in that sort of spot, you have to be very real with yourself to say, if we step back, is this thing doomed? Or like, do we just hold the line and say no one else can get in, no one else can get in until we like figure out all the manual things that we can then set up for scale, and then we'll try it again, we'll back off, and then if it's like too much, it's like, oh shit, put it back on, hold the line, and then go back from there.
And that sounds like a closed beta, or like so how do you actually prevent too much scale that you can't handle, I guess?
Yeah, I think Superhuman is actually one of the most unbelievable case studies for this sort of thing. So when you, and it is amazing to me that they're still doing this to this day. When I onboarded to Superhuman like 4 years ago, when that just launched, they made me go through this whole process where I filled out a survey. I told them everything about like how I use email, what devices I use, how often do I get to inbox zero, how many emails do I get per day, how do I philosophically think about my email. And then they like their whole like sign up flow was that. And then from that, they picked out, here are the people that we think we can successfully onboard. And then it's shocking. To this day, they do a 30-minute onboarding call with every single person. They get them set up with a product. They show them the workflows. They set up their inbox with them so that they're ready to go. And they go from there. Like that is one of the most unbelievable examples of it, because they have scaled the actually unscalable thing somehow, but they were really thoughtful about like, we only want people in here that are gonna have success. It's a very, very different approach than just like your classic waitlist. Your classic waitlist is just like, everybody can sign up and then we'll just like give it to 1,000 people. They said anyone can sign up. We're gonna give it to the people that are gonna make it work. They're going to use it and they're going to find success. And these are the people that are going to give us the feedback that we need, because that is our market. And so I think being really explicit about that is important. If you are doing like a super consumer product, like, I mean, Robinhood did this, or like they continue to do this anytime they roll out something new. They got like 1 million people on a wait list. Coinbase NFT, just straight wait list. But that's because the user is looking at the product in a very transactional way. Whereas signing up and using a new email client is not a transactional decision. It is a considered purchase. So you have to think about a lot about like the considered purchase version of it. MoviePass, super transactional. But the problem there was like, it was so transactional, but they didn't have anything that like could actually support that sort of case. And so they should have just locked it down and let people in as they went.
Yeah, everything I've probably given advice to other people on sounds like remove as much friction as possible. Like the Superhuman case is like, no, it's not about friction, because retention is more important than like new user growth. And then I've heard people say like, oh, but we can't say no to money. And they're like, no, we're gonna say no to your money. Like we're gonna make sure that our reliability and retention is super high before we make it even.
Harder. And even with Drift as a B2B example, I had mentioned that we like change our persona pretty constantly. We change our pricing pretty constantly. We change our core feature set that we wanted to build on pretty constantly. And at many points, we had this customer base that signed up for this other use case. They were paying us hundreds of dollars a month because they wanted to use, like, at one point we had an NPS tool where you can like send an NPS survey to your customers. And we had a whole bunch of customers that signed up and bought and were most excited about that. But we were pivoting as a business and we had to say, we no longer want your money for this thing. We would love it for this other thing. But the fact that we were disciplined about it and said, this is where our market is going. We would love for you to join us, but it's okay if you churn. Like, that's the other thing. You have to be okay with early churn in those cases where you're pivoting, because if we tried to like maintain all those use cases, we would be supporting marketers, product marketers, salespeople, support people, CSMs. Like, we would be supporting every single person in the business, and the VP levels at each and the manager levels at each. And so saying no in the B2B case is also important sometimes. But it's a say no, but point them somewhere else, or say no, not yet. We want to get it right. And we promise we will, if like, you know, you give us the space to get there. And if they move on to something else, then so be it. As long as you spent that time perfecting how you were going to get the next person like them, it's okay if they move on to something else.
Got it. For the NPS case, did you actually point them to a different product and say, hey, we recommend this tool?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So
Nice.
we pointed them to, like, we said, we are going to build these products now. We would love for you to keep paying for them. But I went out of my way in all these cases. I went out of my way to find like the best version of that product elsewhere. And I would email the customer, get on a call, say, hey, we're not doing this thing anymore. I spent a bunch of time. I found this other thing. I think it has all the features that you need. Like that sort of thing built us. Even if they weren't like early customer fans, it built us all these early like evangelists that would walk away having a great experience. And that again, it's the human in the loop stuff. Having a human in the loop there, like, is what builds the brand. It builds the awareness, and it builds the things that people are gonna want to share if you don't have like a viral thing in your product.
Yeah, it's also it gives them way more respect for you as well. It reminds me of when Slack started issuing refunds for people who weren't using their accounts.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I got 56 cents back or something, you know, for having it, like, because I didn't log in one day. You know?
Yeah, which is super cool.
Really
it's amazing. It's like, wow, this company actually respects me and my time and my money. I will give them more of it.
Yeah. Cool. I'm gonna pause for a second. Hey, anyone who's on the call, if you guys want to unmute or ask any questions, feel free to go ahead.
I guess, like, I have a question. When you're working at Drift early on and still figuring out your personas and pivoting and things like this, were there any things or processes that you learned to make it more efficient to know when to move on, or anything that you tried with a lot of effort that just completely failed but you thought was going to be successful?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it was one of the things that I always felt like the founders were pulling the trigger on too early. But looking back, like the ruthlessness was critical. And it was a lot of like, it was, I wrote these somewhere. I don't remember where I put them. I'm going to try to remember it off the top of my head, but it was like the first question we tried to answer was like, who cares? And if we could figure out who cares, great, let's keep going to the next question, which was, do they care enough to try it? And if we can get them to care enough to try it, great, we'll go on to the next question. But if we can't get them to care enough to try it, then we got to move on. We got to move on to a different thing. The value prop is wrong. The persona is wrong. The market is wrong. We got to make a move. And a lot of times, like, my view on it when we were in that stage was like, but we can figure it out. Like, we can give it a little bit more time. We can figure it out. And I think, like, I also want to say that there is a philosophically important framing here, which is what is the type of business that you're trying to build? For us, we were trying to build a business that helped company to customer communication, customer to company communication. And we knew that we wanted to like build an IPO company on that path. In other cases, which was not the early version of Drift, in other cases, you might be building something that is like, we are going to solve this problem no matter what. And if you were trying to solve this problem no matter what, I wouldn't like drop it and move on if you can't answer the next question. But if you were trying to like, if you were saying, we want to build a business in this industry, then you got to be a little bit more ruthless. So it's an understand which are you building for, because I think a lot of times early founders are like, I'm going to do both of those things. And they wind up in this like really hard spot where it's their baby, it's the problem they want to solve. They don't want to give it up, and they see some, positivity in the market, and so they like keep going. But then they look back a year later and they're like, shit, we maybe should have like changed that a little bit sooner. So I hope that mostly answers your question.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Cool, you got it.
Damita, do you want to ask the question about the social impact groups?
Sure. I'm just wondering how you establish this culture of human in the loop. I work with a lot of nonprofits, including at SPC, and often there's less of a focus on doing things manually and then turning to automation. It's more, I want to build a platform and it's going to achieve these 9 objectives and users will come on at some point. So how do you build that culture, or how did you see it reinforced that it's okay to be manual and then automate incrementally?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is showing examples of why it works. So like one of our marketer, Dave Gearhart, early on was the king of just doing the manual thing and then showing everyone the results of the manual thing. He would show back up and say, I sent these 50 emails. Here's the thing I learned. Here are the responses I got. I got 3 people that signed up. And it was like that, like every few days. And the more everyone saw those types of examples, they saw how the manual stuff actually netted positivity and good outcomes, the more they were like, oh, maybe I need to spend my time doing that. Because now all of a sudden they feel like they're being left behind because they are not doing that too, because that's the thing that's working. So it's all about like, find examples where it works, double down on those as much as you can, tell those stories again and again and again and again, whether those are stories from another place or within that organization. And the more that you can show how it works and show how it ended up with a better outcome, the more people will realize like, I need to do that too if I also want those types of outcomes.
That's super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Oh, you're muted.
Thanks. Just noticed that too. Get the little pop-up. Yeah, go ahead. If there's someone else.
Yeah, hi. This is Gerda. You mentioned earlier something about measuring data, but you have to be clear exactly how you're going to use it. That really resonated with me. What framework do you use there? Like, when do we need to figure out how we're going to use the data we're measuring up front? When is it good to just establish some baseline? Anything you can expand on there would be very helpful.
Yeah. So I think early on, there's like one exception to this, which is as a company, it's important to establish what your North Star metric is. So whether that's revenue, whether that's signups, whether that's some other version of it, setting that up and pointing everyone to it and saying, we are making that number go up is super powerful. Even if you don't have a clear answer of like, what do we do if it goes down? That is like a North Star company goal, point everyone in a direction decision. The other is like more tactical decisions that you might make around your product or your service or the way that you're doing your offering. And to that, it is like, it's really just being disciplined on saying, okay, you're going to track it. What does it tell us? Like, what does it actually tell us? Not what is the number going to be, but what is that chart that you want us to build going to tell us? Is it going to tell us that we need to invest more in engineering? Is it going to tell us that we need to stop doing this thing in customer support? Like, we have to figure out what it is going to tell you. And then you have some clear indication of what you're going to do if the answer is, beyond the line or above the line. And it's just about being disciplined, of agreeing on that stuff and forcing people to give an answer on it. And if you can't get a good answer, then you just got to say, if you don't know what we're going to do with this, and it's not our main goal, tell me why we should spend our time doing it. And it's just like posing those questions makes people realize like, oh, okay. And I'm guilty of this too. I did this all the time where I showed up and said, we need to track these things. And then someone was like, why? Like, Matt, I could set this up, but I just don't know why. What are we going to do with it? So it's really, the answer there is just like discipline and asking those questions.
Thank you so much.
So Matt, we're at time. Thank you so much for coming to join us today. Anything else you wanted to share in closing, or any ways that we can stay connected to you?
No, I got nothing else that I'd like to toss out there on those topics. As I had mentioned, I am doing angel investing and advising of early stage startups. My email is matt@mattbilotti@gmail.com. My Twitter is @mattbilotti. So hit me up there. Let me know. Love kicking around early ideas. Love working with early teams. Love solving the like -1 to 0, 0 to 1 stuff. It's one of my favorite places to be. So if I could be helpful in any way, feel free to reach out and let me know.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Matt, there's a question here. Do you work with nonprofits?
I have not worked with nonprofits before, but if you reach out, we could talk about it.
Awesome.
Good answer. Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining. Have a great day.
Thank you very much. This is awesome. Take care.
Bye.